has more than one royal family.
Welcome back to another episode of Wrestle Dads. I'm Chip. These are the boys, Alex and Parker. Today's episode, we have another first for Wrestle Dads pod. He is a former professional singer for the band Bedlight for Blue Eyes, currently the creator and founder of MTL Town, a mental health platforming using puppets, and of course, the professional wrestling fan, Mr. Daniel Rinaldi. Welcome to Wrestle Dads.
Thank you for having me.
We're happy to have you on, man. We love, like, with May being Mental Awareness Month, like, we're happy to have you on our show, and this is going to be perfect. So thank you for coming on. So first question, before we jump into Mental Town and mind noise coaching, I have to start out with your past career as a musician. While doing my research, I got to listen to City and the Ghost, Waste My Time, and your covers of Jumper and Take Me Home Tonight, and I was just blown away by how good they were. You're a really good singer. So, what was the moment of inspiration that made you want to become a musician?
Ever since I was young, like I'm 36 now, so I guess it started out like I always was in like church choir growing up, and then I did like local theater groups, and it was a probably like high school, so around 2001, 2002, that I was in a performing arts high school, and that's really where like the singing passion started to really kick up. And that was about the time where I started to go to like concerts and started to go to concerts with friends and realized like there were other possibilities out there that wasn't just like theater and chorus and classical music. I was like, oh, there's rock music out there. So in 2005, 6, my favorite band at the time, which was Bedlight for Blue Eyes, lost their first lead singer, and I was devastated. And then I ended up joining the band, and that's where the passion kind of continued to unfold. So I'd say about high school is when it really started to tick up for me.
That's awesome. So, you said 0506, you were just like the lead singer of Bedlight for Blue Eyes. He just quit, or what was the reasoning behind?
So it was kind of like a mutual parting of the ways. When you're living with 4 other people in a van for most of your life, for most of your days, it could get very, very tumultuous. So I think that led into him departing the band. And this was MySpace era, right? So I remember like a bulletin going out that he was leaving the band and he had left and they were going to hold auditions. And I was like, I wonder if I could do this. So I was 18, just turned 18 years old, trying out for this band that would later on become the next 4 years of my life touring the country.
That's great. You've blown my mind right now. Like that, you're very impressive. So, Alex, take it away.
Besides singing, can you play any other instruments? And if so, what is your favorite one to play and what it was the hardest one to learn?
I wish that I knew how to play any instrument well. I've always been one to like kind of like start the process of playing, but never actually get serious enough and focus enough to learn it. Like I tried learning piano and I was doing really well, and then I was like, oh, this requires a whole lot of work. So unfortunately, I've never been able to like put too much time into it. But if I had to choose, it would probably be like piano or guitar. Guitar is pretty hard for me. Piano was something that came a little bit easier when I've tried. So if I was gonna go for it, it'd be piano. But I think I'd love to learn how to play guitar because, like, I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, the guitar rocks. I definitely feel you there. So you're just pretty much just a vocalist. Is that what you would categorize?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like that's I've and I always laugh with friends and other people where like I've always been around some of the best musicians and I never asked for them to teach me. Like I've been around some great guitarists in my life and I would have had like full opportunity to learn, but just never did it. So like yeah, I've always just kind of been a vocalist.
The guitar is very hard. Like I tried
Yeah,
to learn as a young person and I have smaller hands. So like that was my issue. Like trying to
I'm
hit
right there
certain
with you.
notes. It's just like I can't hit like certain notes. So it's just like guitar is not for me, but it is one of the best instruments known to man, that's for sure. Parker.
How did your former band Bud Light for Blue Eyes come together?
He said
So
Bud Light, but Bed Light. I'm sorry.
that's fine. I love it. Um, that's a great question. So I wasn't in the band when it formed. However, I do have the insight to how it was formed. So in like so the band was from New Jersey, and the New Jersey punk rock emo scene was huge, monumental, super influential. And all of these guys were in local bands together, all knew each other. And eventually they wanted to kind of like, they were in hardcore bands and they kind of wanted to do something different. So they ended up finding a more melodic singer. And that's kind of where it formed. And they ended up getting signed to one of like the biggest Jersey labels that there was, Trustkill Records, and that's kind of like the history of them getting together. They were just a lot of them were just childhood friends that were playing in other bands and then kind of came together to form Bedlight.
Perfect. And just to piggyback off that a little bit, Trustkill Records, does that still exist?
So yes and no. Trustkill now exists more as like I would want to say, I mean, the owner might correct me if he sees this, but I think it exists more as like a nostalgia label now, as far as they put out like old school vinyl, they put out merch drops and different things like that. So they've been a while ago they had kind of went out and were no longer a label, and now they kind of have resurfaced as this, I would say, like a nostalgia label.
Okay, perfect. We'll stop you there so you don't get in trouble. All right. So I really enjoyed some of your cover songs, but did you guys write your own songs for Bedlight for Blue Eyes, or so what are you? And wait, sorry, I'm reading this wrong. Let me rephrase this. I really enjoyed some of your cover songs, but did you guys also write any of your own songs for Bedlight for Blue Eyes? And if so, what are a couple of your favorites or ones that stand out to you?
So I'm biased because the band essentially was split in half into two albums. So there's the album called The Dawn, which is the previous singer, and then there's the album called Life on Life's Terms, which had City and the Ghost, Waste My Time, and songs like that on it, which is me. So I'm always biased to that. And some of my favorite songs were definitely City and the Ghost is definitely one of them. Broken Door is another one that I really love. Waste My Time is a special one because it's actually the first song that I ever wrote and recorded with the band. Um, so that was definitely a special one. And then classic ones for me as a fan before I joined were songs called Ephemeral Addictions, Leaving Berkeley Heights, and a song called Dig on This.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna dig into a little bit on Life on life's terms a little bit later. So be ready for
All
that
right.
one. Alex?
We also learned in our research that you guys did a lot of touring together. What was that experience like, being on the road and do shows nightly, especially ones as big as Warped Tour?
So touring is the best and the worst thing at the same time. So the touring that we did, which was like a 12 or a 15 passenger van, is very hard to do, especially at that time. I say that to say this is when like gas prices were cheaper and certain things were a little different. But the best parts about touring is really just like meeting people over the country and getting to kind of perform and live out your dream every night, which pretty much similar to, if you were going to compare it to wrestling, it's one of those things where they travel around the country nightly and get to perform and do what they love the most. So it's pretty similar in that way. It was awesome to play things like Warped Tour. We also did like one of like my favorite tours ever was we toured with a band called Newfound Glory and Census Fail, which was like, some of my childhood favorite bands. So to tour with them and to kind of see them like side stage, like listening to your music was a pretty cool experience. And just getting to perform in front of that volume of people is really awesome.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And Newfound Glory, I like them growing up myself. So I appreciate your music taste, my man. So speaking of touring, we came across the fact that the band Paramore used to open for your band Bedlight for Blue Eyes during one of your tours. What was it like to work with them and to watch them reach the success they have now?
I mean, I think it's been amazing to watch them grow so much, because there was definitely periods of time where like they definitely could have called it quits. Like there's always been, they've gone through a lot of lineup changes, they've gone through a lot of stylistic changes, and to see them now like opening for Taylor Swift is pretty insane. Going from this like, this indie band that, I think the singer was like 15 or something when they first started. So to like see her out there now as like this iconic lead singer, this kind of like, role model, I think is a definite great term for her as well. To kind of see them out there from where they were as just this kind of like young band making their way through the ranks, is pretty incredible. And they've always been, I think Haley and the drummer are our original members, and they've always been super like really, really nice and personable people, and definitely have worked really, really hard over the years to get where they are, and they definitely deserve everything that they have right now.
Awesome. Yeah. Paramore's, they're great. Like, well,
Yeah.
she's great. You said she started when she was 15. That I didn't do too much research into them when I was researching you, but I did not know that she was 15 when she started.
Yeah, she started super young.
That's awesome because he's 11, so it like makes me wonder like when he's gonna start
Right?
doing something fantastic. I just like he's very into cars, so I know he's like he knows anything about cars. As soon as he sees it, he can tell me what it's on the street and all that. So I think it's gonna be somewhere mechanically with this one. This one I don't
Awesome.
know yet, but oh, it's actually his turn.
What type of music genre would you put Bedlight for Blue Eyes in?
That's a good question, because I feel like we've always kind of like just been on the outside of all of the things that we were lumped into, right? Like, so being on this like hardcore emo label, we were just kind of like outside that sound, but we also weren't poppy enough to kind of hang with the pop bands either. So like I'd like to say that we kind of like turned into this like pop rock band, that just like a general pop rock. Um, but definitely kind of have always, we've been able to kind of tour with a whole bunch of different genres because I think we've always kind of just sat on the outsides of each sound.
I got you. Kind of sounds like you created your own genre there in some way. Like it's not emo, it's not pop, it's not rock, it's not whatever you want to say. It's interesting. I loved listening to it. I listened to your whole album and I was just like, this is awesome. This is the guy that's gonna be on our show. So
That's awesome.
yeah. So speaking of that, I really enjoyed Life on Life's Terms. So that's your album, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you like why Life on Life's Terms, like just why I love that album? Can you explain the meaning of that?
So Life on Life's Terms at its core was all of us being very confused with life and where to go. So like the cover of it is a little boy looking up at like a bunch of sneakers, kind of like hanging on the power line. And that was like our thought process with that was like, there's a kid and he's got like all of these walks of life in front of him. Which one is he going to choose? And I think that's kind of like where we were. Life on Life's Terms, I believe, is actually like an AA, Alcoholics Anonymous term. And that was kind of something we just adopted, was like living life on life's terms, right? Like being able to kind of just like, take what we were living and put it into the album. And I think that was one of the biggest things that resonated with people at that time, that people who really appreciated the album, was there was like a sense of like, it was more like you were having a conversation with us than you were just like listening to a song.
Yeah, and I loved listening to it. And you said you put it best. It was like having a conversation. Like when you were like singing, I was going yes or like no or like answer. You know what I mean? Like I was kind of like nodding with you. Like it was awesome. Like I hope I hope more people. I hope doing this will bring more people to listen to it. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Okay, Alex.
Can you tell us a little bit about what caused the band to break up in 2009 and what is everyone doing now?
So the band broke up. So the music industry, specifically like bands like ours, the industry was sort of changing. Bands were getting poppier. The scene was getting more like a clique. So there was a lot of, you had to know somebody to get somewhere. And again, like we always sat on the outside of that. So we weren't getting the best of tours. We weren't necessarily happy with each other, with the label, with the way things were going. So we had like 3 or 4 tours lined up, and I kind of woke up one day and was like, I can't do this anymore. This isn't fun. And I always said if it wasn't fun, I wasn't going to do it. It was a very, very hard decision, but it was a decision that kind of had to be made so that we can kind of like protect like the legacy of the band while also like protecting our own mental health and not just like going out there and like hating each other while doing this, so that we were able to kind of just say like, hey, we're going to walk away from this and it's okay to be able to walk away. So it was basically just, it was time got the best of us, and we were no longer in a space where we felt like we could give 100%, and we thought that would be unfair if we did it any other way. And to speak to where the guys are now, they're all kind of like spread out all over the place and just kind of have like your regular 9 to 5. No one's in music anymore. I think the 2 guitarists, Dan and Derek, still will like dabble with some like Instagram covers or things like that, but everyone else is kind of just like living life.
It sucks to hear that, but I'm glad that you realized that when it wasn't fun, you needed to get out. Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm always trying to explain to kids when they're doing sports and like with wrestling. Like if it's not fun, then why are we doing it? Like that's the whole
Right.
point. Like if you're having fun, it's better. Like awesome answer. Thank you.
What made you make the jump from music to therapy? How long have you been a therapist? And was it something you were pursuing while with Bad Light for Blue Eyes?
So when I first left the band, it was a very bad time for me. I kind of didn't know what was next. I didn't know what my place was. And I kind of bounced around a little bit. I filled in for a friend's band. I did some recording out in Los Angeles for a bunch of different projects that never really panned out. So I was always just kind of very confused. And then um, I had I had been with my girlfriend, then fiance, now wife, and she had like a really big push for me to go back to school. It was something I never thought was in the cards. I always, I had dropped out when after my freshman year to join the band, and I never thought of myself as someone to go back. But I was kind of trying to figure out like what to do and what what I could take from my experience in the band and apply to my life now, because I knew touring and joining a band wasn't in the cards for me. And the thing that I loved most about being in the band was human connection, was connecting with humans and being able to have a conversation with them. And I was thinking like, what can I do that would be like that? And mental health and becoming a counselor, therapist was something that seemed like I'd be able to kind of fill that cup for myself and be like, that's something that feels really good. So I ended up going back to school, becoming a counselor, and I've been in the field for like almost 4 years now. um and it's something I just absolutely love.
That's awesome. I'm glad you were able to find something else that you loved later on in your life. I mean, you said you're 36 earlier on in the show. I'm
Mhm.
also 36, so I often find what's happy and all that. So I'm constantly going back and forth. And just want to say congratulations on getting married. Was she your high school sweetheart?
No, so she actually was a fan of Bed Light and had come to a show. Um, it was a show in Rhode Island. It was a snowy night, and she just happened to be there because she had seen like a YouTube video of my band. I think it was a YouTube video of me actually singing in a friend's dorm room, and she had seen that, and she had come to the show. We had met, and I was like blown away by this girl, and we both kind of had our own lives, significant others at the time, and we kind of went our separate ways, but always like she'd come to shows and we'd talk here and there. And like this is the age of instant messenger. So you'd talk on instant messenger and all that stuff. And then as fate would have it, I landed in filling in a band in Massachusetts. And that's where she was from. And we started talking again, and the rest is history.
That's an awesome story. Thank you. And just to piggyback one last thing off that, going back to school is a very hard thing to do, especially when I'm assuming you were in your 20s, almost 30, when you decided to do this. So I know that's a very hard decision to make, and you did it, and congratulations on that as well. So, first therapy question, not to get too crazy, but this one has been getting suspended from school, trying to defend himself and his friends from bullying.
Mm.
Do you have any advice that could help him still stand up for himself, but without getting into trouble?
I definitely think one of the things that school, because I've worked in school systems for a long time. I worked in a middle school for about 6 years. And one of the biggest things that I think we miss in the school systems is teaching kids how to advocate for themselves and then being the adults that actually having adults there that are actually going to listen to you and show you that change is going to happen, right? Because kids will bully if nothing happens, and kids will continue to retaliate because nothing is done about the bullying, right? But if we take the two and we do something about it, right, where we find out why the kids are bullying your son and why your son is retaliating and why this is happening, we can then get to the core. Because a lot of times, I don't want to be the person that says like hurt people, right? But like a lot of times the kids that bully are going through things, right? And the bully and the person who's being bullied just don't know enough about each other to make sense of how to act as they're developing, right? Because they're kids. Their brains are still developing. They're not able, like you and I, to look at a situation and take a step back and learn how to say like, no, don't do that. I need to talk to somebody about this, or not just react when someone's, saying something mean to them or putting their hands on them, right? Because if someone's in your bubble, you want to react. And I can't tell you how many times I've reacted, right? But now I have a little more insight. So I think it starts from a systematic level in schools, where teaching your son where to advocate to, and then having those people that he's advocating to actually do their job.
Thank you. I agree. Like, I got called into the office. I don't want to get too much into this, but like that's pretty much like my whole point. I was like, okay, so he's being punished. Is the other one being punished? I just want to make sure that like both sides are being covered here. And it's like bullying is big in school, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I just think it's not that the teachers don't care. I think there's only a handful of teachers. There's 100 of kids. It's hard to pick and choose your battles, which ones you're going to punish and which one, all that. But it kind of feels like to me like he's a bigger kid. And I tried to explain to him like what you were talking about. Like sometimes if someone is being mean to you and you don't like it, you just kind of have to walk away, take a deep breath, and find something else to keep your mind off of it. And I don't know if that's the best advice that I could give him, but I figured while we have you on here, I'd ask that question.
One of the biggest things that I always have tried to teach kids in my time working in schools and then as a therapist is to be curious. And I think a lot of times when we're curious, we can find those ways to figure out how to shift a situation, right? You're bullying me, but I'm curious as to why you're doing this, or I'm curious as to why no one's helping me, or why this exists in my school, right? A lot of times kids are sponges, right? So if the community and the culture in the school, is that this is okay, then why wouldn't a kid utilize that type of thing? But if someone sits there and says, hey, I want you two to sit down and I want you to talk about, give us one thing that you want to know about the other person that maybe you don't know, and that would be really helpful for you to know. I think those are the things that end up creating change and creating ways for kids to find other ways than bullying because you just don't understand or get the kid next to you, and then retaliating because you have to protect yourself.
Yeah, find common ground, communicate.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the biggest problem with youth. Like no one talks, everything's self-checkout where you go anymore, so you're not even talking to a human when you're checking out your groceries half the time. Everything's automated. So I think it's really affecting our kids. Like I got two right here. They're 11 and 9. Sometimes they have a hard time talking to me, and I just ask like a simple yes or no question, and I just get like a stare, and it's like, oh boy. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I think it's like all kids nowadays, like not like hating on today's youth, but it just seems like everything being automated, talking is very hard for a lot of people. So we'd like to give you some time to talk about your mental town and mind noise. So if you need a second to go grab a puppet or something to really dive into it, we'll give you all the time you need.
Unfortunately, my puppets are at my office right now, but so I'll give you, a quick breakdown. So Mental Town was really born out of boredom, right? So a lot of times when I feel stuck professionally, I lean into creativity. I think that comes from years of being in a band, years of being a creative. So I wanted to create a space, a world where people could find safety, right? Where you can relate to, like you just said, sometimes you ask your kids a question and maybe they don't know how to respond to it. And a lot of times it's because you're their dad, right? And you're, at the end of the day, your dad. But a lot of times people are able to speak to a character that embodies what they're going through and embodies what they feel. So each character of Mental Town has their own sort of personality, has their own emotion that they take care of, and also participates in the town in the same way, like with the same emotions. So someone might run the mindfulness yoga weekend, or someone might have the shop that helps you with like grumpy feelings. So yeah, it was basically built as a way to help people find, that escape or refine that inner child that they need. Because I think a lot of times too, as we get older, we tend to kind of like suppress that inner child and suppress that want to reach back to our youth. Again, making a comparison to wrestling, it's like, how many adults are like getting back into wrestling now because it's like not this weird taboo thing anymore. It's like, oh my goodness, like there's all these different things that we can latch onto. So that's what like I've created there. And basically right now it lives as a platform for people to get personalized video content that would be in this situation, right? You would want this puppet that your son gravitated towards to talk about bullying, because he has a hard time talking to you. He has a hard time talking to his teachers, but he doesn't have a hard time, kind of listening to this external character that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with his life. So he feels a lot safer there, right? So I think that's the hope for it. And eventually, as I hit different like mountaintops with it, there's other ways, like as far as like YouTube content and different types of content that I definitely want to begin to lean in on. It's just I have this kind of like approach, right? Like of things I want to hit. And my noise just lives as like a coaching for creatives, for people in bands, people in creative areas, for them to receive, wellness. So it's a little bit different than your traditional therapy. It's more goal oriented. It's more a conversation that two people can have. I always say it's kind of like a glorified best friend. So it's just a space where people who are, struggling to find, purpose, struggling to find that next thing that they need, they could have a space for that.
Awesome. And as a 36-year-old, I just have to say, wrestling is awesome. Thank you for bringing that. Now, you said it embodies different emotions. So it's kind of similar to that movie that's actually just coming out in July, right? It's called
Inside Out.
Inside Out.
Or It. Well, there's the one. It's not It. It's
If. Is it If?
If, Imaginary Friend, which is like the one with Ryan Reynolds, but also Inside Out too. So like, I think what Inside Out does is it shows like that you can feel your feelings, and they shouldn't be scary, and they're a natural part of how we live our lives, right? There shouldn't be a reason why you shouldn't feel sad and cry. There shouldn't be a reason why you don't feel angry and understand why you feel angry and what you need to do when you feel angry, right? So I think, each one of my puppets, whether it be positive self-talk, acceptance, grumpy feelings, I have one that deals with, sleep issues, whatever it might be that someone's dealing with. Each one embodies something that someone can look at and go, oh, that's something that I deal with. I don't feel like I'm as alone as I thought I was.
Yeah, feeling alone it sucks. I was there for a couple years myself. Even the children, I was having a hard time being a good dad. I hate I'm okay talking about that now, but being alone, man, that's a killer. A lot of people don't understand depression, and I don't want to dive too much into that. But what's your favorite puppet? Or should I say,
It's
what's
actually,
your favorite character?
so there are probably two that are my favorite right now. There's one that's named Mikey. That's one of my favorites. And then there's one that hasn't been released yet, I guess you would say, named Augie. Augie is the one that deals with sleep, and he's this dragon with two teeth, super colorful. That's just awesome. Kind of reminds me of Fig. I don't know if you remember Figment from Disney back in the day. He was that purplish dinosaur, or
Yeah,
dragon rather, not dragon, not dinosaur, dragon. And then Mikey is another one where it felt very close to. I had an older brother who passed away when I was younger, so it felt very close to that. So that was where that one came from. So that one is a favorite of mine.
awesome. Now, with Augie, is that the one that you posted not too long ago on Twitter? I want to say I saw a
Yes. So
purple dragon.
yeah, that's the one. That's the one that was on Twitter.
Perfect. All right. So my producer's catching on to what I'm doing here. So if you give us 2 seconds, I kind of had this set up. I was hoping you had a puppet because Parker here has his favorite puppet. Do you have 10 to 15 seconds for him to show you his favorite puppet?
Sure.
All right, perfect. Parker, go ahead. So this is Jeffy. I don't know if you're familiar with YouTube. He's a little crazy puppet, and I have to kind of tell him that some of the things that he does and says is not too great, but this is his favorite puppet. So go ahead, bud.
I've had him since 2023. He's my favorite puppet, but his pencil fell out of his nose, so he doesn't have a pencil in his nose, and his teeth, I ripped them out because they were very, very wiggly whenever I first got him. But he's my all-time favorite puppet.
That's awesome. I haven't watched too much content around him, but I've definitely heard of him. I have a lot of young clients that love that guy right there.
Oh yeah, Jeffy is wild. All right, perfect example. You remember Super Troopers?
Yes.
So that crazy monkey,
Okay. Yeah.
So it's kind of like that kind of humor. He's doing crazy perverted stuff, and I have to tell him okay, no, make sure you don't do that out in public. I get it's
Right.
funny, but don't do that out in public. But that's his favorite puppet, and thank you for giving us the time to show you that. Oh, he wants to say something else.
But in the last video of SML, Jeffy, he threw a bowling ball through his front door window.
A bowling ball? Please don't ever do anything you see.
Yeah, don't ever throw a bowling ball.
Thank you.
Sometimes it is hard to get people into programs like you offer. Do you have any advice for people who think they know someone who would benefit but also do not want to offend them?
You walk a very thin line. It's very tough to kind of tell somebody, especially when they're struggling, or someone you love, like, hey, I think you benefit from therapy. I think the biggest thing that we could always do is let them know we're there for them, and let them know that there are resources and options. And a lot of times, like, you're not going to necessarily be able to force someone to do it until they're ready, right? It's really hard to walk in the room. I always say that to people, and I always thank them for allowing me to sit with them, because it is a very hard thing to do, especially like when I get like men my age. It's very hard to get men my age into therapy, and older than that, even more so, to get into therapy and talk about their feelings, right? It's super hard. So I think the biggest thing that we can do is let someone know that, like, when you need it, I'm here. When you need it, I can provide things for you to help. And just letting them know that you're not going to give them advice. You're not going to tell them what to do. You're just going to kind of sit with them and let them know that you're there for them. And when they're ready, that you'll be able to help facilitate some of that.
Perfect. Sorry about my delay. I was just trying to make 3 big notes on that. So, yeah, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, just to sum up pretty much what you're saying. Like, at a certain age, I mean, I'm 36, I'm stubborn. So, good
Right.
luck. Good luck getting me doing something that I don't want to do. And I often think, like, as you were describing this, I think a lot of people are afraid because it's like an intervention, like with a lot of people. Like, some people don't know, like, not a lot of people are actually self-aware, and it's hard to, like, really put somebody on the spot. And I love that you said you got to actually be there for them. You can't just can't just talk to talk. You got to walk the walk. And I think that's the most important part. If you're not there for someone, you're leaving someone alone. It can be rough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done also to, like, reduce the stigma that surrounds mental health and therapy. I think a lot of people are scared, and they have these, like, preconceived thoughts of what it actually is, when in fact it's like, it's a conversation. It's at least my therapy, the therapy that I like to do, is exactly what this is. It's sitting down and just kind of a free flow conversation. And I would tell anyone that is thinking about it or unsure about it, give it a shot. I always say, go therapist shopping, right? You might just find the one that's completely right for you. I have my own therapist, and I went through 3 of them before I found the one that was correct for me. That was exactly what I needed. And that took, like, going on and, like, reading their profile, reading what they were about, reading what the things that they thought about mental health. And I think, the more people that are willing to do that, the better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, my man. Nicely put. Now, this is a wrestling themed podcast, and one of our favorite things about wrestling is storytelling. David versus Goliath, good versus evil, overcoming bullies. So, being a wrestling fan yourself, do you take any inspiration from wrestling while creating ideas for Mental Town or Mind Noise?
I definitely, I've always gravitated towards, um, like, luchadors. And I think that's always been something, like, I've always loved, like, the storytelling of, like, the mask and what that means to them, and the different layers of that. I don't have it here with me either, but I actually have, like, a pretty good collection of lucha masks, it was kind of like a pandemic hobby, where I just, like, went crazy and bought all of these lucha masks. It was probably not the smartest hobby, but whatever. So I definitely borrow from the storytelling as far as, creating these worlds that a lot of these wrestlers will create, such as like a House of Black, right? Where it's like this created world, or if I think back in the day, like, the Brood, or, other certain factions that just had this like deep layer of storytelling. I remember when like the LWO came on the scene, and like, you saw more like luchas coming in, and the storytelling. So like I definitely pull um, a lot from that, the aspect of like, there's just so many different layers you can kind of peel back.
I like it. So luchador. Who's your favorite luchador wrestler? Not Rey Mysterio. Not named Rey Mysterio. That's not fair.
Yeah, I think if we're going current, I'd say like Ray Phoenix is definitely one of my favorite ones.
Good
I
answer.
think he's just an insane athlete. I definitely, it's silly to say it, but like, Penta's another one where I'm like, okay, great. Penta reminds me of what La Parka was to the WCW. Um, similar style, that similar kind of strut that he does. So like that's where I look back. I think when I look back further, I look to guys like Psychosis, La Parka is another one. Although I've heard that he's not so great a human, like Juventud Guerrero was another one that I was super into, but I've heard he's not exactly like the nicest guy in the world, and he's kind of screwed promoters. So there's that about him. So like, yeah, like I mean, I was into Ray, but I was never like a huge like fan of Rey Mysterio.
I gotcha. I just like when other people say that, I'm just like, okay. Like have you scratched the you know what I mean? Like that's just the
Yeah,
surface of luchador wrestling. Like I'm so happy that you brought up Cero Miedo. I love Penta. Psychosis, you brought him up. I wrote him down. I often think of Psychosis when I see Penta in the ring. I
right.
just like, and yeah, Hoovy is kind of an a-hole when it comes to things. Like he's not the nicest person, and a lot of the wrestlers they have bad attitudes. But I mean, like they gotta keep, you know, what I mean, it's hard. Like they're kind of like method actors in a way. Like if you're playing
Yeah.
a heel, they're gonna kind of be a heel in real life to like to kind of keep the kayfabe going. All right, and as we wind down this episode, we're going to loosen up a little bit and have some fun. So we have a series of questions just to find out a little bit more about Daniel Rinaldi. Okay, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right, perfect. So let's start out. What's your favorite? Breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
Probably breakfast.
Perfect. What's your favorite meal for breakfast?
My favorite meal. I'm born and raised in New York City. So this might be a little weird to people, but a bagel with cream cheese and lox. So like smoked salmon.
Oh, ew.
Right. If you grew up in Queens, New York, you know what I was talking about though.
I'm sorry for saying that. Salmon for breakfast does not sound
Yeah.
I like seafood in general.
sorry. I love seafood. It's just I'm more of the white fish type.
Gotcha.
I love swordfish. I love cod. Like haddock is pretty like for on the cheaper end, but it's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah. I just salmon. I don't know what it is. I think the smell gets me more than anything. But
probably.
it's your meal, so sorry that we reacted that way. My fault.
They used Blink 182 the Offspring.
Did you say the used Blink 182 or the Offspring?
Correct.
I'm going with the used.
Awesome. Taste of Ink, is that their favorite? I think that's my favorite song by them. The Taste of Ink.
Yeah, Taste of Ink is definitely good. I think like what's the other song? Box Full of Sharp Objects is another good one.
Yes.
Maybe Memories, I think, is another one. I was definitely a big fan of like their first album. Their later stuff was like they got real artsy, but I like them because when I think of like them compared to Blink and The Offspring, they kind of speak to like the writer and like poetic kind of thing, like lyrics. Like I always thought Blink 182 was kind of cheesy, and like The Offspring was like kind of cheesy to me as well, as far as like with the lyrically. So I'm a The Used guy.
I agree. Like my favorite part of Blink 182, to be honest, were sometimes their album names or sometimes their name of their
Yeah,
songs. Like Take Off Your Pants and Jacket is a pretty good album. Is that an album or
yeah.
was that a song?
No, that was an album.
Yeah, that like they were always pretty good with the production and all that, but it did some things were very cheesy. So good answer, my man. I like that. Parker, if you can put down your puppet, it's your turn.
Who was your favorite tag team of all time?
Ooh, that's a good one.
You
I'd
have more than
have to.
just one.
Yeah, I'd have to say like I was a big Legion of Doom guy. I was a big Demolition guy when I was younger. Um, I'd say if we're gonna go like more current, I'd definitely say obviously like Penta and Ray is definitely a favorite tag team of mine. Um, I dig FTR. I think that I know that I'm sticking with AEW. I realize that I'm sticking with it. Well, no, like Legion of Doom and Demolition were WWFE.
You're allowed.
Um,
You're allowed.
but I think, to be honest with you, I think that the Guns are super underrated. I think with the right, I don't know what's going on with like the Bang Bang Gang stuff, but I definitely think they're super underrated and very good workers. Um, I also love I forgot what the actual team name is. Is it the Rascals? Is it Trey Miguel from TNA? It's like Trey Miguel and somebody else. I think that's who it is.
Repeat it one more time. My producer's
I
kind of a savant with that. If he hears it, he'll be able to come up. Well,
I,
go
I
ahead.
think it was the Rascals. Like Trey Miguel is one of the guys in it.
I'm blanking. I'm waiting on him to respond. 1 second.
Yeah, so like I like definitely like Trey Miguel. He's a good. I've talked to him on Twitter a couple times. Advocate for mental health, so I love that too. But yeah, so like yeah, I mean obviously back in the day, I mean you know Brett and Owen or Brett and Jim the Anvil when they were going. Um, but I always was like the Legion of Doom guy. When they walked in, it was a different thing.
Oh, what a rush is one of my favorite things of wrestling. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome answer. Alex?
Favorite wrestler current and growing up.
So my favorite current, I definitely think my favorite current would probably be like MJF is definitely up there. Malachi is definitely up there. I just love the creativeness of what he brings to the table. Um, for going old school, I was a huge Ultimate Warrior fan growing up. I was a huge Macho Man fan growing up. I was a giant Sting fan growing up. Obviously, you're wearing the Sting shirt. Another current is probably Darby is another one that like I super love. I mean, I'm sure you guys watched the pay-per-view of him setting Jack Perry on fire. So I like, and just like no one does what like Darby is doing. He's just insane. I don't know how much shelf life he has, but it's insane. So I'd say those are my current, and like, yeah, like Ultimate Warrior, Sting were definitely some of my older favorites for sure.
We we think a lot alike when it comes to wrestling, my man, and probably in like when it comes to life in general. But Darby, I couldn't agree more. Like I've said it on previous podcasts, he scares me a little bit. I don't know
Yeah.
what his shelf life is going to be because eventually he's going to break and not be able to come back. Love MJF now that he's back. I mean, I got his scarf, I got his Triple B belt. I actually just posted that today on Twitter so
He
people could
also
see
looked
everything.
he also looked insane coming
Yeah.
back. Like his like physique was insane. I you know, he's just the ultimate, he's like the ultimate troll and the ultimate showman, like wearing the Triple H jacket. And like a lot of people took that as like, oh, he's eventually going to WWE. But I think I took it as like, what a troll moment for him to be like, you thought I was doing this. I'm going to wear your guy's jacket.
I loved it. I thought it was awesome. Like when he's my favorite. I thought AEW was lacking a little bit not having him, and I think they waited
Mm-hmm.
for the perfect time to bring him back. Like he's the man, and he's about to show everybody why. Sorry, Swerve, but MJF's back. I love Swerve too, but yeah, Malachi Black's one of this Parker's favorite. He loves Malachi. I loved him as Alistair in
Yeah.
WWE. Like he was phenomenal. All right, Parker, you're up next.
What is the best wrestling match you've seen live?
That's a good question. I don't think I've actually, have I ever been to an event? I feel like I've never been to an actual event, which I'll have to change that. When I
Yeah.
grew up, I was always, yeah, I was like super young watching wrestling, so I never went to them. I was like, I also like would tape them on VHSs and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I don't think I've seen like indie shows. I don't know if that counts, but
Hell yeah, that counts. That counts as wrestling. A house show that you paid admission ticket and sat next to a ring. That counts.
yeah, yeah. So I definitely think, you know, there's some of those. I definitely want to get like there, you know, I live in Massachusetts, so the TD Garden is always a spot that AEW hits. So I'd love to go see a show there. I have a mutual friend that runs a wrestling promotion called Prestige Wrestling. I'd love to get to one of those because they put on some really phenomenal shows. And if anyone's listening and you're near their shows, go to them because they have some really great stuff going on.
Yeah, we've heard of Prestige. That's based out of Massachusetts, correct? Am I off on that?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's based out of Massachusetts. I should know that, right? Like,
I know my
if I'm
producer's
gonna
listening. He'll chime in
if
and
I'm gonna
correct.
reference it, I should know it. Um, hmm.
Just give him a second. I don't like to give out false information, so yeah, Prestige Wrestling. Where is that based out of? Oregon.
There you go. We were a little bit away.
A little bit away. There's something up there that starts with a P.
Yeah,
I'm sure,
I
but
think there's another one up here somewhere, but yeah, Prestige is they definitely put on some phenomenal shows.
awesome. Alex?
Favorite wrestling match all time.
That's a good question. That's a really tough question. I don't know what my favorite one is.
If you're teetering between two, we'll allow those two, and then I'll pick the best one for you if you're having a hard time.
I'm trying to think. I think it was it Undertaker versus Yokozuna? I want to say it was I feel like it was a casket match. I think it was it was an Undertaker versus Yokozuna casket match. And that was definitely one that I absolutely adored. And then I'll definitely also go with the first TLC match between the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardy Boys.
Yes.
Because I think that was like a revolutionary match and almost like, I think it set the stage for a lot of what AEW puts on, which is a lot of like heavy weapon use and like heavy, outside use. So it definitely has like set the stage for a lot. So I think it was like, and like that spear from, was it the spear? Yeah. It was like a spear from like the top of the ladder is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, I want to say it was Jeff Hardy hanging on the belt and Edge speared him off the ladder. That's one
insane.
It's one of the most iconic things. And to piggyback off that, I couldn't agree with you more with AEW. They have the ECW wrestling, but with the WCW look. So I get why like older people, well, I'm saying we're old, we're only 36, but like older fans like us, we get the nostalgia feeling when we're watching it and we appreciate it. And then again, you said Undertaker versus Yokozuna. I know my producer's going to love that because he loves the Undertaker, up there in his top 5. All right, so thank you for playing that little game. We always like to do that with our guests to like, break the ice and ease the tension and have a little fun. So before we actually end the show, since the topic was mental health, do you have any advice for anyone listening who might be going through some tough times, feeling alone, or that might inspire or help them along?
Yeah, seek help. I think the hardest part, especially nowadays, is it's very easy to be alone. And I think the biggest thing is that there is to know that there are people out there that will and want to help you, and sit with you and have conversations with you and not give you advice, not tell you what to do, not pressure you, not anything like that. So if you're out there and you're struggling, you know, reach out to anybody. It doesn't have to be a loved one. It doesn't have to be someone that you know. I've had plenty of people reach out in DMs going like, I know you can't be my therapist, but could you point me in the right direction? Or I know that like do you know anyone in this state? Or do you have any advice for me on how to find this resource? And it's like, just reach out. Like I'm always, anyone out there, if you see me online, reach out. I have no problem helping you find the resources that you need. It's one of like my favorite things to do is help others. So the biggest thing is to reach out.
I love it, man. And just to go quickly into the closing, just thanks again for coming on, and for people to reach out and to ask you help specifically on Twitter, where can they find you?
So my Twitter is at Rinaldi Music. So DRINALDI Music. And I think it's the same on Instagram. So yeah, I'm always down to talk. I'm always down to especially talk wrestling. I like to troll Twitter with wrestling a lot, because I think it's funny because there are so many people that take it way too seriously on Twitter, and are like, Twitter is like an extremely toxic wrestling wasteland right now, which is sad as a wrestling fan. It's sad to see. But yeah, Rinaldi Music, reach out.
I love it. And you purposely troll. I'm gonna have to look out for those. So sometimes with Twitter, man, I don't know if you're listening, but when like that blue dot pops up, it's hard for me not to click it, and then it refreshes all the tweets. So like I lose people I'm following's tweets constantly just by that
Right.
little feature of Twitter. But again, thanks again for coming on. You guys listening should go and check out Daniel Rinaldi on Twitter or X at DRINALDIMUSIC. That's D Rinaldi Music. And you can find his link tree with everything he has going on. And please don't forget to give him a follow. Anything else you want to say there, Daniel?
No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate talking with you guys. And yeah, I appreciate you thinking I'm cool enough to have on.
And all right, well, I think that's all we have for you on this episode of Wrestle Dads. You can follow us on Twitter at WrestleDads Pod. For audio purposes, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Amazon Podcast, and iHeartRadio. For video purposes, you can find us on YouTube and TikTok. Just search Wrestle Dads. You'll find us. And if you like what you're hearing, please rate 5 stars and hit that subscribe button. Thank you. Peace.
Scissor me!